Millionaire made a cruel bet with a poor boy. If you can fix my Ferrari, it's yours. What seemed like mere provocation ended up revealing secrets, exposing lies, and changing lives in ways no one could predict. A story of courage, perseverance, and dignity that will move you. So subscribe to the channel, hit the like button on this video, and comment where you're watching from. Some dreams are perfect gears waiting only for brave hands to set them in motion. In the quiet of a cold dawn, the metallic echo of tools against metal pierced the silence of the abandoned garage. Under the yellow light of a single bulb, a man with calloused hands worked on an old exposed engine, his wrinkles deepening with each movement. Beside him, a boy with attentive eyes no more than 8 years old, watched with fascination every gesture, every adjustment, every sigh of concentration. An engine is like people. Michael, murmured the man without taking his eyes off the work. It speaks, breathes, feels. The secret isn't just in fixing, it's in listening, the boy nodded, recording each word like one memorizing a sacred prayer. His father, Richard, was considered in the neighborhood a magical mechanic, a man capable of resurrecting machines that others declared dead. He had no diploma, no certificates, only a gift passed down through generations that now flowed to his son's small hands. When you hear the heart of an engine, Michael, you'll understand that every machine has a soul. That night, the boy didn't know those would be some of the last lessons he would receive. That soon silence would occupy the place of that hoarse voice, leaving only echoes and the weight of an invisible inheritance, the ability to hear what others couldn't. 15 years later, those words still pulsed in Michael Harrison's chest as he swept the immaculate floor of Elite Garage, the most prestigious luxury car workshop in the city. His gray uniform, faded from so much use, contrasted with the dazzling shine of vehicles he could never own. He was just the assistant, the invisible one, the boy who cleaned up the traces left by the real mechanics. What no one there knew was that every time an engine was started, Michael heard it like complex music. Every discord, every wrong note, every hesitation in the metallic roar told him stories that the diplomas framed on the walls couldn't decipher. That morning, however, something different entered through the wide garage door, announced by camera flashes and the buzz of employees. It wasn't just a car, it was a legend on wheels. A Ferrari 250 GT California Spider 1961 in vibrant red, now dusty and silent. Pushed, not driven. Dead, not sleeping. Behind the vehicle walked Edward Wade, the millionaire collector whose real estate empire was as well known as his explosive temper. As he watched the car being positioned in the center of the workshop, his expression mixed anger and frustration. "I want the best mechanic here now." The deep voice echoed through the space, making everyone freeze in their places. "I paid a fortune for this piece at an auction and discovered it's a damn paperweight." The workshop manager, Morris Holmes, a man with graying hair and servile posture, ran to appease the client. "Mr. Wade, it's an honor to receive you. Philip will personally take care of your car. He's our specialist in classic models." Philip Torres, 30-something, a specialist trained in Europe, approached with a confident smile that hid his nervousness. Edward Wade's reputation preceded him. A man who fired employees for minor errors in his own companies wouldn't be patient with failures in his precious collection. "You can count on me." "Mr. Wade, I'll do a complete diagnosis and—" "I don't want a diagnosis," Edward cut him off. "I want results. I've already been through 3 specialized workshops." He made air quotes with his fingers. "All promised repairs and delivered excuses. They replaced expensive parts, and the car remains dead." In the farthest corner of the workshop, Michael continued his work, pretending to be absorbed in cleaning, while his ears caught every word. There was something about the Ferrari that intrigued him, not just its legendary beauty, but an inexplicable feeling that this car held a secret. During the following 3 days, Michael watched frustration grow. Philip dismantled part of the engine, replaced components, tested systems. Other mechanics were called to give opinions. Theories emerged and died. Electrical system, fuel injection, compression, timing. Each day, Edward Wade's countenance became darker, and the nervousness in the workshop palpable. On the morning of the 4th day, a new specialist was brought in, the renowned Charles Mendez, whose services cost more per hour than Michael earned in a month. His hands, protected by fine leather gloves, barely touched the engine, preferring electronic diagnostic instruments. "The problem is complex," he announced with a measured voice after 2 hours of analysis. "Possibly a failure in the combination between the original electrical system and modern adaptations." Edward Wade looked at the ceiling, exasperated. That's what the last specialist said before charging me the price of an apartment. Michael, while cleaning nearby tools, noticed something strange. He noticed peculiar marks on specific screws, adjustments that seemed purposely wrong, and small inconsistencies that none of the specialists had mentioned. They were subtle signs that only eyes trained in simplicity could notice. Eyes like his father's. That night, after everyone left, Michael remained. He had asked to do overtime cleaning, a request no one questioned. After all, who would suspect the janitor? In the solitude of the workshop, he approached the Ferrari. Without touching, just observing, as his father had taught him. First, know. Then, understand. Finally, heal. The smell of raw gasoline was subtle, but present. There was something wrong with the fuel system. The marks on the carburetor nuts indicated recent adjustments, but incorrect ones. A ground wire almost imperceptibly loose created a failure that modern electronic tests wouldn't catch in a car of that era. "You're being sabotaged," he whispered to the machine, as if talking to a patient. But why? The next morning, tension in the workshop had escalated to alarming levels. Edward Wade had arrived early, determined to get answers. Philip seemed to have aged years in just a few days, and even manager Maurice avoided direct eye contact with the millionaire. "I'm tired of this circus," thundered Edward, hitting his hand on the Ferrari's hood. "I hired the best, paid for expensive parts, and I still have a red paperweight." It was at this moment that Michael, wielding his broom, made the decision that would change his life. His fingers trembled slightly when he stepped forward, interrupting the embarrassing silence that followed the millionaire's angry outburst. "Excuse me, sir." His voice sounded lower than intended, almost swallowed by his own nervousness. All eyes turned to him. Surprise, confusion, and on some faces, cynical amusement at the janitor's boldness. "Who are you?" asked Edward, noticing for the first time the existence of this young man in a worn uniform. "Michael Harrison, sir. I work in cleaning." There were some muffled laughs, quickly silenced by the millionaire's cutting look. I think I can help with the Ferrari." The silence that followed was dense, almost palpable. Edward Wade's face went from surprise to amusement in seconds, his lips curving into an ironic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You?" The word came out loaded with disdain. "A janitor is going to fix what trained specialists couldn't?" Michael felt the weight of those stares. Philip, the specialist, crossed his arms with a scornful smile. The manager looked horrified at the interruption, but something inside Michael, perhaps his father's voice, prevented him from backing down. "My father was a mechanic, sir. He taught me to listen to engines." He paused, gathering courage. "And this car, it wants to speak." Edward stared at the young man for long seconds, his calculating gaze evaluating every detail of this youth who barely passed 20. Then suddenly an idea seemed to illuminate his face. It wasn't kindness, it was opportunity. "Very well," he said with a dangerous smile. "Let's make a bet." The manager tried to intervene. "Mr. Wade, this isn't necessary. We have qualified professionals who—" "Silent!" The order was dry. Edward approached Michael, staying just one step away. "If you can make this Ferrari work, kid, it's yours." A murmur ran through the workshop. The offer was absurd. The car was worth millions. But before anyone could fully process it, Edward continued, "But if you fail, you pay me half of everything I've already spent on parts and labor." Michael's heart accelerated. That sum certainly exceeded everything he could earn in years, perhaps decades. It was a trap, a form of public humiliation disguised as opportunity. The millionaire knew it was an impossible bet for a young man like him to fulfill. "How much time do I have?" asked Michael to everyone's surprise. 3 days, replied Edward with a cold smile. The same 3 days each specialist had. Michael looked at the Ferrari. His mind calculated risks, possibilities. It was madness, it was financial suicide. But his instinct, that same instinct his father had cultivated, told him there was something wrong in this whole story. Something beyond a simple mechanical defect. "I accept." The words left his mouth before he could rethink them. Edward Wade extended his hand, which Michael shook, sealing a pact that seemed destined for tragedy. "We start now. Maurice, prepare a contract. I want everything documented." While the manager hurried away, Edward turned to the mechanics present. "No one helps the kid. He wanted the chance. He'll do it alone." Michael felt the weight of the decision settle on his shoulders as he saw the scornful smile on his colleagues' faces. Philip, particularly, seemed satisfied with the spectacle that was announced. Only one person, Anthony, the company's older security guard, threw him a look of genuine concern. The first day was dedicated to observation. Michael spent hours just looking at the Ferrari's engine, studying each component, each connection, each adjustment. He didn't touch anything. simply observed, as his father had taught him. Know the patient before trying the cure, Richard used to say. Meanwhile, Edward Wade made sure the news spread. He called friends, other collectors, even a journalist specialized in luxury automobiles to document what he considered to be a humiliating lesson for a cheeky boy. At the end of that first day, when everyone had already left, Michael remained. Security guard Anthony, breaking direct orders, allowed him to stay beyond hours. "My boy," said the security guard, approaching with hot coffee, "why did you accept this crazy bet?" Michael accepted the drink, feeling the warmth of the mug in his cold hands. "Because there's something wrong here, Mr. Anthony. This car isn't just broken. It's being sabotaged." The security guard widened his eyes. "Sabotaged? How so?" "Look at these marks." Michael pointed to small details in the engine. "These adjustments were made on purpose. Someone is ensuring this car doesn't work. But why?" Michael shook his head. "I don't know yet, but I'll find out." That night, he couldn't sleep. In his small apartment in the suburbs, shared with his widowed mother and younger sister, he tossed and turned in bed while his mind worked on the possibilities. He remembered his father, his lessons, his unwavering faith in his son's talent. "You have the gift, Michael," he used to say. "Your hands speak with machines. Don't waste it." Mrs. Clara, his mother, noticed her son's restlessness during breakfast. A domestic worker, she carried in her hands the marks of a life of hard work, but maintained in her eyes the sweetness that not even difficulties could erase. "What's happening, son?" she asked, placing another cup of strong coffee in front of him. Michael hesitated, but then told everything. The Ferrari, the bet, the intuition of sabotage. When he finished, he expected to see worry on his mother's face. Instead, he saw a calm smile. "Your father said you were born with blessed hands," she said, holding her son's hands between hers. "He died believing you would do great things with this gift." "Trust your hands, Michael. Trust what your father taught you." On the second day, Michael began the practical work. With methodology and calm, he started with the points he had identified as sabotaged. First, the loose ground wire, a subtle failure that would cause erratic behavior in the entire electrical system. Then, the vacuum hoses with micro fissures, so small they needed very trained eyes to be perceived. Edward Wade appeared in the middle of the afternoon, accompanied by two rich friends and the journalist. They observed from afar, commenting and laughing occasionally. Michael pretended not to hear, concentrated on the work. "How is our mechanic janitor doing?" provoked Edward, approaching. "Learned much from the broom?" The friends laughed. The journalist took notes, clearly interested in the human angle of the story. The poor young man destined for failure before the powerful millionaire. "I'm finding interesting things." "Mr. Wade," replied Michael without raising his eyes from the engine. "For example, someone adjusted this carburetor completely wrong, almost as if they wanted to ensure the car wouldn't work." Edward's smile wavered for an instant. "Are you insinuating that my previous mechanics were incompetent?" "No, sir." Michael finally looked at him. "I'm insinuating they may have been very competent at doing exactly what they were paid to do." A heavy silence fell over the group. For a moment, something similar to anger crossed the millionaire's face, soon replaced by a forced smile. "I see that besides being an improvised mechanic, you also have a fertile imagination. You have until the day after tomorrow to prove your point or pay your debt." At the end of that second day, Michael had corrected the absurd carburetor regulation and replaced the damaged hoses. His suspicions were confirmed. The new parts that had been installed were perfect, but had been deliberately misadjusted or sabotaged after installation. The problem wasn't mechanical, it was human. When he was about to leave, Philip appeared in the workshop, surprising him. The specialist looked at Michael's work with barely disguised contempt. "Do you know what you're doing, kid?" he asked with false concern. "I think so," replied Michael, cautious. "I found several problems that shouldn't be here." Philip shrugged. "Old cars are complex. Sometimes the problem is where we least expect it." There was something in the man's tone that left Michael alert. A veiled warning, perhaps? Or a subtle threat? "Why do you think the car doesn't work, Philip?" The specialist hesitated for a moment, looking around as if checking they were really alone. "Some machines are like people, Michael. They keep secrets they don't want to reveal." He paused significantly. "And some people pay well to keep those secrets." Before Michael could respond, Philip walked away, leaving in the air the weight of that enigmatic conversation. That night, at home, Michael obsessively researched that specific Ferrari model. He discovered it was extremely rare. Only a few dozen had been produced. The market value was astronomical, especially for specimens with proven history. Edward Wade's car, acquired at auction, had something special beyond rarity. It had belonged to a famous actor from the 70s, increasing its value as a collector's item. While browsing specialized forums, a comment caught his attention. Someone mentioned a rumor about a Ferrari of that specific model that had disappeared after a scandal involving falsified documents. The coincidence was too great to ignore. On the third and final day, Michael arrived at the workshop before everyone else. He had a plan, a theory, and needed to confirm it before the circus arranged by Edward Wade began. He searched in the car's most hidden corners, in places that only very trained eyes would know. And he found it. A small secondary serial number, almost invisible, different from what was registered in the documents. His suspicion was confirmed. This wasn't just a valuable car. It was a car with a secret history, possibly a sophisticated fraud worth millions at stake. At noon, the garage was full. Edward Wade had turned the event into a spectacle. He had brought more friends. The journalist was accompanied by a photographer, and even some employees from his companies came to watch. The atmosphere was that of a Roman circus, everyone waiting for the improvised gladiator's failure. Michael tried to concentrate, but felt the weight of those stares. His phone vibrated, a message from his mother. "Trust your hands. Your father is with you." Those simple words brought tears to his eyes, which he quickly wiped before anyone noticed. He breathed deeply and continued the final adjustments. Edward approached, impeccable in his Italian suit, the luxury watch shining on his wrist. "Your time is running out. Kid," he announced with poorly disguised satisfaction. "I'm waiting for this Ferrari's roar or the sound of your crying when you realize the debt you just assumed." Polite laughter echoed through the environment. Michael remained silent, finishing adjusting the last component. "I'm ready," he said finally, standing up and cleaning his grease-stained hands on a cloth. A buzz of expectation ran through the crowd. Everyone approached, cell phones ready to record the moment. Michael, however, didn't immediately move to the car. Instead, he faced Edward Wade. Before starting the engine, "Mr. Wade, I'd like to say something." The millionaire made an impatient gesture. "Go ahead." "We have a show to conclude." Michael looked around. At the anxious faces, some expecting his failure, others, mainly the humbler employees, silently cheering for him. "This Ferrari wasn't broken," he began, his voice firmer than it had ever been. "It was sabotaged." Murmurs of surprise and incredulity. Edward frowned. "What are you saying?" "I found deliberately wrong adjustments, purposely loose connections, regulations altered to cause failures. This car was meticulously prepared not to work, no matter how many parts were replaced." Philip's face, the specialist, paled slightly. Maurice, the manager, began to sweat. "And do you know why, Mr. Wade?" continued Michael. "Because this car keeps a secret that someone doesn't want discovered." Edward's expression hardened. What kind of accusation is this? "The hidden serial number on the chassis doesn't match the documents. This car has a different history from what's in the record. Someone frauded its provenance to artificially increase its value." A heavy silence fell over the garage. The journalist began taking notes frantically. Edward Wade seemed stupefied, alternating his gaze between Michael and Philip, who now seemed about to flee. "This is a serious accusation," said Edward finally, his voice dangerously low. "Can you prove it?" "I can show the real number. It's hidden under the driver's side access panel. As for the rest," Michael shrugged, "the car will speak for itself." He approached the vehicle, feeling the weight of that moment. He opened the door and slid into the leather seat. The interior was a temple to automotive luxury from another era. For an instant, he allowed himself to imagine that this car could really be his, as promised in the bet. But he knew it wasn't about that. It never had been. "An engine is like people, Dad," he whispered to himself. "It just needs to be heard." He inserted the key in the ignition. He closed his eyes for a second, saying a brief, silent prayer. Then he turned it. The engine coughed once, twice. Then, like a sleeping animal awakening, it began to rumble. A deep, vibrant sound that grew until it transformed into a powerful roar that echoed through the garage like metallic thunder. The audience's silence was broken by exclamations of astonishment. Some applauded spontaneously. Edward Wade's face was a complex mask of emotions: surprise, disbelief, and finally a cold anger directed not at Michael, but at Philip and Maurice, who now tried to discreetly move away. Michael got out of the car, leaving the engine idling, its constant rumble like background music for the drama unfolding. He approached Edward, striving to maintain composure despite his racing heart. "There you have it. Mr. Wade, the Ferrari works." Edward stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes, it works." He turned to the journalist, who continued documenting everything. "Quite a story, isn't it? The janitor who fixed what specialists couldn't. Then, to everyone's surprise, he extended his hand to Michael. A man of his word keeps his promises, no matter how unlikely the result. "The car is yours." An incredulous buzz ran through the crowd. Michael felt his legs weaken, unable to believe what he was hearing. He shook the millionaire's hand automatically, still processing the meaning of it all. Edward, however, hadn't finished. He approached closer and whispered, only for Michael to hear, "But this story doesn't end here, kid. I want to know exactly who was behind this sabotage and this fraud, and you're going to help me." Before Michael could respond, Edward stepped away, resuming his public persona. He turned to those present, raising his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed something extraordinary. A raw talent discovered in the most unlikely corners. This young man didn't just win a car today, he earned my respect." Camera flashes fired, capturing the moment when Edward Wade, the implacable mogul, symbolically placed the Ferrari keys in the trembling hands of Michael Harrison, the former janitor. But while he smiled for the photos, Michael felt a chill down his spine. He had unraveled a mystery only to get involved in something bigger and potentially more dangerous. The Ferrari rumbled softly in the background, as if trying to warn him about the challenges to come. If this story is already touching you, subscribe to the channel now. There are always exciting and inspiring stories here that show how life can turn around in an instant. That night, unable to sleep, Michael contemplated the Ferrari keys on his house's simple table. His mother, after an initial moment of disbelief, was now worried. "Son, this is much bigger than us," she said, sitting beside him. "A car like this costs more than this house multiplied by 100. And this fraud story? You're messing with powerful people." Michael nodded, thoughtful. "I know, Mom, but I can't back down now." The phone rang. It was Edward Wade. "Tomorrow, 8 o'clock at my office," he said without preambles. "Bring everything you discovered about the car. We're going to get to the bottom of this." The next morning, driving his old Honda, he still didn't have the courage to use the Ferrari. Michael arrived at the imposing building that housed the headquarters of the Wade Empire. He was led directly to the penthouse, where Edward awaited him in an office larger than his entire apartment. "The journalist published the story," said Edward without ceremony, throwing a magazine on the table. On the cover, Michael's photo next to the Ferrari. Under the headline, "The Janitor Who Tamed the Beast, the incredible story of the young man who challenged an empire. The repercussion is bigger than expected," continued the millionaire. "I've received calls from other collectors wanting to know more details. The fraud may be bigger than we imagined." Michael explained his discoveries in detail. The adulterated serial number, signs of falsified documentation, systematic sabotage to hide the truth. "I'm almost certain that Philip and Maurice are involved," he concluded. "The question is, who else is part of this, and why?" Edward intertwined his fingers, thoughtful. "We're dealing with a sophisticated fraud network in the luxury car market. Someone is falsifying histories, creating false provenances to increase value, and when someone suspects, they ensure the car never works properly to hide the evidence. Will you go to the police?" Edward smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Eventually. But first, we're going to dismantle this operation from the inside. And you, Michael, are going to help me." "Me? How?" "You're the sensation of the moment, the unknown genius who fixed the impossible. I'm sure the fraudsters are in panic now, trying to understand how you discovered. We'll use this to our advantage." The plan was audacious. Michael would become a kind of consultant to Edward, examining other collection cars with suspicious histories. In reality, they would be tracking the fraud network, collecting evidence and identifying those responsible. "It's dangerous," warned Edward. "These people move millions. They won't hesitate to protect their scheme." Michael thought about refusing. He thought about his mother, his sister, the simple and safe life he had led until then. But then he remembered his father, his lessons, his dream of seeing his son recognized for his talent. "I'm in," he said finally. "But with one condition." "Which?" Edward raised an eyebrow, surprised by the boldness. "When all this is over, I want to open my own workshop, a school for young talents without opportunities. And I want your support for this." The millionaire stared at him for a long time. Then a genuine smile, perhaps the first, appeared on his face. "Done. But first, we need to survive this hunt," completed Edward, extending his hand to seal the agreement. In the following weeks, Michael lived a vertiginous transformation. From invisible janitor to celebrated specialist, his name began to circulate in exclusive circles of classic car collectors. Edward Wade presented him as his special consultant, a self-taught genius who could hear what engines said. The Ferrari, now legally his, remained stored in a secure garage. Michael still didn't feel comfortable driving a machine worth more than everything his family had ever owned. Besides, the car had become a symbol, bait to attract the fraudsters closer. The first clue emerged unexpectedly, when an acquaintance of Edward's, another collector named Roger Myers, requested a special consultation for his recently acquired Lamborghini Miura. I paid a fortune, but something doesn't seem right to me, he confided to Edward during a charity event. I'd like your young prodigy to take a look. Michael examined the vehicle with his meticulous method, listening to every nuance of the engine, every vibration. Soon he found familiar signs, small adulterations, deliberate incorrect adjustments, and most revealing, a serial number that didn't completely correspond to the documentation. It's the same pattern, he confirmed to Edward afterward. The same technique, probably the same people. Edward nodded, putting together pieces of the puzzle. Roger bought from a dealer in Chicago, who in turn acquired it at an auction in Europe. The chain is complex, difficult to trace. Michael had a different theory. It's not the initial seller that matters. It's who certifies authenticity, who provides historical documentation, the original parts. A discreet investigation revealed that both Edward's Ferrari and Roger's Lamborghini had passed through the same certification specialist, a respected automotive historian named Victor Lambert, whose signature on a provenance document instantly increased any classic car's value. We need to get close to this Lambert, decided Edward. And you, Michael, will be our gateway. The plan was risky, but elegant in its simplicity. Michael would be presented as a prodigy who wanted to learn from the master. His recent fame would open doors, and his apparent ingenuity wouldn't arouse suspicion. Victor Lambert's residence was an impressive neoclassical mansion on the city outskirts. The man, already in his 60s, possessed the aristocratic aura of one who had always lived among treasures. He received Michael in his private office, surrounded by miniature models, historical photographs, and framed documents. "So you're the young miracle worker," said Lambert, studying him over his fine framed glasses. "Edward told me about your feat with the Ferrari." Michael played the role of humble apprentice, expressing admiration for Lambert's knowledge and his contribution to preserving automotive history. The older man, clearly accustomed to flattery, gradually lowered his guard. "You know, young man, this world is more complex than it seems," commented Lambert, serving cognac in crystal glasses. "It's not just about mechanics, but about history, provenance, exclusivity. That's why I want to learn," replied Michael, accepting the drink he didn't intend to consume. "To understand not just how cars work, but what makes them truly valuable." Lambert smiled, a smile that didn't reach his astute eyes. "Value is a perception, Michael, a construction. Sometimes, the story we tell about an object is more valuable than the object itself." The conversation continued, carefully guided by Michael to extract information without arousing suspicion. At the end, Lambert offered something that exceeded his expectations, an invitation to participate in an exclusive meeting of collectors at his country property in 2 weeks. "Only true connoisseurs are invited," he explained with an air of superiority. "It will be a unique opportunity for you." When Michael reported the progress to Edward, the millionaire didn't hide his satisfaction. "It's perfect. This meeting probably brings together everyone involved in the scheme. Collectors willing to pay for falsified provenances, intermediaries, technicians responsible for adulterations. How do we proceed?" asked Michael, feeling the weight of responsibility. "You go, obviously. I can't appear. Lambert knows I'm investigating my Ferrari's provenance." "But you," Edward smiled. "You're the naive prodigy he wants to impress and maybe recruit." Michael would spend the following 2 weeks in intensive preparation. Edward discreetly hired a former police officer to teach him basic investigation and self-defense techniques. A specialized team prepared miniaturized recording equipment. Every detail was meticulously planned. On the eve of the event, however, Michael was dominated by doubts. In his small apartment, he stared at the ceiling while trying to calm the anxiety that compressed his chest. His mother, perceiving his agitation, sat on the edge of the bed. "What's really happening, son?" she asked with the intuition only mothers possess. "You barely sleep, you're always tense." "This isn't just about cars, is it?" Michael hesitated, but then told everything. The fraud, the investigation, the dangerous plan. Mrs. Clara listened in silence, her face visibly aging with each revelation. "It's very risky," she said finally, her voice trembling. "These people, if they discover what you're doing..." "I know, Mom." Michael held her hands. "But it's the chance to do something important, to use what Dad taught me to make a difference." Mrs. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, as if seeking strength beyond this world. "Your father had a saying, she said finally. He said that courage isn't not being afraid. It's moving forward despite it. She squeezed her son's hands. Be careful, my son. Come back to us. Victor Lambert's rural property was impressive. A restored colonial farm with stables converted into climate-controlled garages to house his vast collection. Upon arriving, Michael was received by a butler who led him through tree-lined avenues flanked by centennial trees to the main house. The event brought together about 30 people, predominantly middle-aged men or older, all with the confident posture of those accustomed to power and wealth. Michael, at 25, was easily the youngest present. He recognized some faces from magazines and newspapers: industrialists, politicians, celebrities. Lambert introduced him as the extraordinary young man who resurrected the impossible Ferrari. Michael felt evaluative gazes, some curious, others subtly hostile. Among those present, he identified Philip, the former elite garage specialist, conversing intimately with a gray-haired man carrying a leather briefcase. The first part of the event was an exhibition of Lambert's private collection, dozens of extremely rare cars, each with a meticulously documented history that the host narrated with almost theatrical precision. Michael noticed how he emphasized connections with famous personalities, historical events. Exclusivity! This Jaguar, announced Lambert in front of an elegant 50s model, was a gift from an Indian Maharaja to a Hollywood actress. Only 2 examples of this specific configuration exist in the world. Michael observed everything with trained eyes, detecting subtle signs that only a connoisseur would perceive. Small inconsistencies in painting, slightly anachronistic components, details suggesting the perfect history, was careful fabrication. During lunch, served at a long table under a pergola, Michael was strategically positioned next to an Argentine collector who didn't hide his enthusiasm for the young genius. You know, in Buenos Aires I have a Maserati that no one can make work properly, the man confided after several glasses of wine. I'd pay generously for a private consultation. Michael perceived the opportunity to dig deeper. May I ask where you acquired it? The Argentine hesitated briefly. It was a special arrangement. Victor helped me with documentation. You understand, some cars have complex histories, import issues. The conversation was interrupted by Lambert, who announced that after lunch there would be a special meeting for select members in the mansion's library. Michael wasn't included in this restricted group, but this was already foreseen. The recording device in his wristwatch was activated, and the alternative plan was in course. While the selected guests headed to the library, Michael executed the rehearsed maneuver. He feigned excessive interest in one of the displayed cars, asking technical questions to the responsible employee. When he noticed attention was focused elsewhere, he discreetly slipped through a side corridor, following the mental map he had memorized from the mansion's blueprints obtained by Edward. A service corridor led to a small room adjacent to the library, originally a cigar closet, now converted into storage. Through an old ventilation opening, partially covered by an ornamental grate, Michael could hear the conversation in the library without being detected. The voices came with surprising clarity. Lambert presided over the meeting with a maestro's confidence. Gentlemen, our arrangement continues prosperous, but we need redoubled caution. The incident with Edward Wade's Ferrari exposed us to unnecessary risks. It was Philip's incompetent fault, interrupted a harsh voice. The sabotage should have been undetectable. It wasn't just that, replied Lambert. We underestimated the boy. He has a rare intuitive talent. He could be a valuable asset or a significant threat. Michael felt a chill run down his spine as he realized he was being discussed. And what do you suggest, Vic? Asked another voice. 2 options. Recruit him or neutralize him. The silence that followed those words was dense, loaded with dark implications. Michael felt his heart accelerate. He was in enemy territory, alone, hearing a group of powerful men consider his future, or the absence of it. Neutralizing would be risky, someone pondered. He has visibility now. He's associated with Edward Wade. That's exactly why he's dangerous, another voice countered. If he discovers the pattern and shares it with Wade, the entire operation is compromised. Lambert regained control of the discussion. Before any drastic decision, I propose a test. Offer him participation in the scheme. See his reaction. If he accepts, we gain a valuable talent. If he refuses, we can always claim a tragic accident with one of these old cars, completed a cold voice. Brakes fail. Young people drive too fast. Michael felt nauseous. What had begun as a fraud investigation now revealed itself as a conspiracy willing to kill, to protect its secrets. He needed to get out of there, warn Edward. He silently moved away from the opening, preparing to slip back through the service corridor. That's when he noticed a shadow at the entrance. Someone was blocking his exit path. Curious, isn't it? How old walls have ears. Philip's voice was low, almost friendly, in contrast to his predatory gaze. Michael froze, calculating chances, distances, options. The former elite garage specialist smiled without humor. You know what's most impressive about you, Michael? It's not your talent with engines. It's your naivety. Did you really believe you could face people who've been doing this for decades? People who defraud collectors and kill whoever gets in the way, replied Michael, trying to buy time while seeking an exit. Philip shrugged. It's just business. Stories increase values. Some cars are worth more for what they represent than what they are. And when someone discovers the farce, it becomes a tragic accident. It happens rarely. You'd be the third in 15 years. Philip extracted a small revolver from his jacket's inner pocket. Come with me. No alarms. Michael knew that if he left that room at Philip's gunpoint, his chances would drastically diminish. Adrenaline sharpened his senses, and his father's voice echoed in his memory. When everything seems lost, remember that every machine has a weak point. Philip's weak point was his arrogance. He was so confident in his advantage that he came too close. Michael pretended to stumble, losing his balance forward. When Philip instinctively stepped back, Michael took advantage of the moment to throw the contents of a decorative vase toward his face. The distraction was enough for him to advance, landing a blow to the armed forearm. The weapon fired, the bullet embedding in the wall while the two men struggled for control. Michael wasn't a fighter, but weeks of training with the former police officer and a life of heavy work gave him physical advantage over the specialist with his comfortable lifestyle. He managed to immobilize Philip against the wall, hitting his hand against the surface until the weapon fell. A second blow, this time to the temple, left the man stunned enough for Michael to escape. The gunshot, however, had alerted the house. Alarmed voices echoed in the corridors. Security guards ran in his direction. Michael launched himself along the path he had memorized, seeking an alternative escape route. The back patio, where some cars were parked, offered his best chance. Without time to choose, Michael threw himself into the first vehicle he found with keys in the ignition, a classic 70s Porsche. The engine responded instantly to his touch, as if recognizing a master. The property gates were closed, but a side service entrance, used for deliveries, was only partially blocked. Michael directed the Porsche toward that narrow opening, accelerating while seeing in the rearview mirror men running in his direction, some drawing weapons. The car passed scraping against the sides of the opening, leaving behind part of its immaculate paint, but conquering freedom. On the rural road, Michael pressed the accelerator to maximum, using all the power of the German engine to distance himself from danger. When he judged himself safe, he stopped at an abandoned gas station and used the cell phone he had kept hidden in a false seam of his jacket, a trick taught by the former police officer. The call to Edward was brief and objective. Confirmed. It's a criminal organization. Lambert is the leader. They tried to kill me. I'm escaping. Where are you? Edward's voice was tense. Michael gave approximate coordinates. Stay where you are. I'm sending someone trustworthy. Don't trust anyone else. 40 minutes later, which seemed like an eternity, a discreet SUV approached. From the vehicle emerged a man of ordinary appearance whom Michael recognized as part of Edward's private security team. We have to move fast, said the man, identifying himself only as Silva. Lambert has connections everywhere. Police officers, politicians, judges. On the way to the hideout prepared by Edward, Michael learned that the contingency plan was already underway. The recordings made by his watch had been transmitted in real time to a digital security team. Edward was mobilizing legal and media resources for a coordinated attack against the organization. The boss would never put you there without protection, explained Silva. There were 3 teams ready to intervene if things got out of control. The hideout was an apartment in an anonymous building in the suburbs, property of one of Edward's subsidiary companies. There, Michael could finally breathe, taking a hot shower while processing everything that had happened. Hours later, Edward arrived personally, accompanied by 2 security guards and a woman who introduced herself as Dr. Helena Rocha, federal prosecutor. Your testimony, added to the recordings, gives us what we need to start a formal operation, explained the prosecutor. But the process will be delicate. These people have influence, money, connections. How long until we can act? Asked Edward. To do it right, without loopholes for them to escape. 2 weeks minimum. Michael thought about his mother, his sister, how they would be vulnerable during this period. My family, they're already safe, Edward assured. I sent a team as soon as you confirmed the conspiracy. They're at one of my coastal properties, well protected. The operation developed like a complex chess game. While authorities gathered evidence and prepared warrants, Edward used his influence to neutralize Lambert's power in different spheres. Accounts were discreetly frozen, alliances were broken, political protections were weakened. Michael remained in the hideout, working with investigators to identify patterns of adulteration and fraud in dozens of suspicious cases. His technical knowledge and visual memory allowed him to create a detailed map of the criminal operation, which proved to be much larger than they had initially imagined. "It's not just about cars," he explained to the investigation team. "It's a money laundering and tax evasion scheme. Cars with falsified histories are traded among collectors in different countries, generating apparently legitimate profits for money of dubious origin." The 2 weeks extended to 3, then 4. Michael's anxiety grew, but he understood the need for perfection. A single procedural flaw could compromise the entire case. Finally, on a cold winter morning, the operation was launched. Baptized Operation Authenticity, it mobilized hundreds of federal police officers in 5 states and 3 countries. Victor Lambert was arrested at his mansion, along with dozens of accomplices, including Philip and Maurice. The seized vehicles were worth hundreds of millions. Documents revealed a scheme that had operated for almost 2 decades. Victimizing collectors around the world, Michael watched the journalistic coverage of the operation alongside Edward in the penthouse office. "We did it," said the millionaire, genuine satisfaction in his normally controlled voice. "They'll pay for every fraudulent cent, every threat, every affected life." In the days that followed, the story dominated the news. The Ferrari case, as it became known, revealed connections to other white-collar crimes and shook the global collector car market. Michael, initially kept anonymous, ended up being identified by the press as a key piece in discovering the scheme. Surprisingly, this amplified his fame. The young man, who was already known for his exceptional talent, was now celebrated as a hero who had dismantled a criminal organization using only his intuition and courage. 3 months after the arrests, when the dust began to settle, Edward invited Michael for lunch in his office. "Do you remember the condition you imposed to help me?" asked the millionaire. Michael nodded. It seemed like an eternity had passed since that conversation. "I want to open my own workshop. A school for young talents without opportunities." Edward smiled, pushing a folder across the table. "It's done. I bought a deactivated industrial warehouse in your neighborhood. Solid structure, ample space, accessible location for community youth. The documents are in your name." Michael opened the folder with trembling hands, finding architectural plans, property documents, 5-year financial projections. It's too much," he stammered. "Emotional. Consider it an investment. 15% of profits for me in the first 10 years, then the operation is completely yours. Fair?" Michael knew Edward didn't need those 15%. It was just his way of keeping the young man's pride intact, giving the appearance of business. "Not charity. More than fair," he replied, extending his hand. "Partners?" "Partners." The Richard Harrison School of Mechanics, named in honor of Michael's father, opened its doors 6 months later. The inauguration was an event that mixed 2 worlds, celebrities and billionaires arriving in luxury cars, side by side with humble neighborhood families, united by admiration for the young man who never forgot his origins. The Ferrari that had started it all was displayed in the center of the main hall, completely restored, a symbol of what was possible when talent met opportunity. Beside it, a framed photo showed Richard Harrison in his small improvised workshop, smiling while teaching a child Michael to use a wrench. Below the photo, a bronze plaque displayed the phrase that would become the school's motto: "An engine is like people. It just needs to be heard." At the inauguration ceremony, Michael stood beside his mother and sister while addressing the gathered crowd. His voice, once timid, now carried the confidence of one who had found his true purpose. "My father taught me that true talent isn't in expensive tools or framed diplomas. It's in hands that respect every machine, every engine, every challenge. This school won't just train mechanics. It will train people who know how to listen, who see value where others see only problems." The first class had 20 students, selected not by grades or resources but by passion and potential. Many came from situations similar to what Michael had lived, raw talents who just needed a chance. Among the instructors, besides Michael himself, were experienced mechanics, engineers, and even Anthony, the former elite garage security guard, who had been the only one to believe in him from the beginning. Every 6 months, new students were admitted. The school's reputation grew rapidly, and soon major automotive companies began recruiting its graduates. Some even established exclusive scholarship and internship programs. Edward Wade, contrary to his own prediction, never charged his percentage of profits. Instead, he established a fund for school expansion to other cities, taking the model to underserved communities throughout the country. 3 years after the inauguration, on a quiet afternoon, Michael found himself alone in the main workshop, working on an especially challenging engine with a group of advanced students. He was absorbed in the explanation when he noticed a visitor observing from the door, an elderly man, impeccably dressed. "Can I help you?" he asked, cleaning his hands on a cloth. The man smiled, approaching with slow steps. "Don't you recognize me, Michael?" "I'm Bernard, your father's friend." Michael's heart accelerated. Of course he remembered. Bernard had been his father's mentor, a legendary mechanic who had later moved abroad. "My God, Mr. Bernard. It's been so long!" The students were dismissed for break, and the two sat in a quieter corner of the warehouse. "I've been following your story," said the elder. Richard would be proud. More than proud, he would be amazed. Michael's eyes welled up. "I try to follow what he taught me, and you've gone beyond. Much beyond." Bernard looked around, at the busy school, at the young apprentices, at the machines being disassembled and reassembled with almost reverential respect. "You know what your father always said about you? That your hands had magic. That you didn't just fix machines, you understood them, respected them." A tear escaped, rolling down Michael's cheek. "I miss him every day." "He's here," replied Bernard, pointing to the environment around them. "In every engine that comes to life, in every young person who discovers their talent, in every lesson you pass forward." That night, after everyone had left, Michael remained alone in the workshop. He walked to the Ferrari that had changed his life, sliding his fingers over the gleaming hood. He got into the car, feeling the soft leather of the seat, the polished steering wheel under his palms. He turned the key, and the engine responded instantly with its characteristic roar, powerful and melodious. It was the sound of a healthy mechanical heart, of a machine that had found hands that understood it. "You were right, Dad," he whispered, feeling a deep peace envelop him. "An engine is like people. It just needs to be heard." And while the engine sound filled the empty workshop, Michael knew he had found his place in the world, not just as a mechanic, not just as a teacher, but as someone who transformed lives by teaching others to listen. Outside, the city lights shone against the night sky. Young talents slept dreaming of the next day at school. Families found new hopes, and somewhere, Michael knew, his father was smiling. For some stories don't end when we think they do. Some just begin again, passed forward like a legacy, from heart to heart, from hands to hands, like precious tools that build unimaginable futures. And you, what are you waiting for to listen? If this story moved your heart, leave your like and share it with someone special. And comment below where you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far our stories reach.